It's about challenging the questions, which is, I think, a characteristic of only excellent and confident law students, that they would go behind the question, so to speak, and attack the premises that lead to the quote or the question given. And so this leads to an excellent answer, but also to, I think it's more fun to write. So I think that's the unorthodox element.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. Whether you're at school, sixth form, university, thinking about a career in law or exploring law careers, you're in the right place. We are the one-stop shop for student lawyers. If you'd like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentlawyer.com. Welcome to the Student Lawyer podcast series. My name's Camilla, I'm a solicitor and I'm going to be your host for today. In today's episode, we are joined by Dimitrios Kyriazis, also known as the Law Prof. Dimitrios is Assistant Professor of EU Law at the Law School of the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki. He is a member of the Associated Researchers Group of the European Banking Institute and Research Fellow in Law at Northeastern University, London, where he previously served as Head of the Law Faculty and Senior Lecturer in Law. Prior to this, Dimitrios taught for several years at Oxford University on the undergraduate and the postgraduate degrees, first as a tutor and then as a lecturer in law. Dimitrios obtained his LLB, being awarded a distinction, at the University of Athens, graduating top of his class. He also holds a Master's in Jurisprudence, also being awarded a distinction from the University of Oxford, graduating top of his class and being awarded the Clifford Chance Prize for the best overall performance in the Masters, with the support of an Onassis Foundation scholarship. Dimitrios completed his MPhil in law, being awarded a distinction as a Light Senior Scholar at St Catherine's College in Oxford. And finally, he completed his PhD at Oxford University with the support of a Clarendon Scholarship, which is arguably the most competitive scholarship of Oxford University. Dimitrios has a blog called The Law Prof, where he writes tips for students about how to write first-class legal essays, which he clearly has a lot of experience of doing himself as well as teaching. And he has recently published a book, How to Write Excellent Legal Essays, an Unorthodox Guide. In this episode, we'll be finding out all about Dimitrios' approach to helping students improve their essay writing skills and how to secure top marks, as well as finding out more about his books. So without further ado, let's welcome Dimitrios onto the show. Welcome, Dimitrios. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be back. Thank you for having me.
No, we're delighted. I wondered if you could start off by telling the listeners about the Law Prof. Why did you decide to start your blog and how did the book come about as well?
Well, thank you for that question. That's really an interesting story, I think, because I only started the Law Prof blog because it was actually a request by my former students, my students at the time. So the students I was teaching at Oxford Uni, third year law students studying EU law, and first year law students studying constitutional law in Oxford, but also students from the New College of the Humanities in London, now called Northeastern University London, who were constantly telling me that the things I was sharing with them in our first initial tutorial sessions had never been taught to them, because I was asking them, okay, you need to write so many essays this week, one for tort, one for contract, whatever. Have you ever been taught how to write an essay in general, the structure or what you need to say, what you need to omit, etc.? And they said no. And I kept teaching them this stuff, but it never stayed. I had to somehow document it at some point. So they asked me whether I could document it somehow. And I said, yeah, sure. And the idea came to me, why just document it, in a Word doc and upload it on Moodle or e-learning or whatever? I'm going to create my own law blog and then just have it there so anyone can access it for free. So that's the story of how it started.
I completely resonate with that. I don't remember being taught how to write an essay, so I think it's a fantastic thing that you're doing. And I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about your book, because I know that you've just written a book.
Yes, yes, that's right. I realized that with the blog, the separate blog entries, some students would search for a particular, let's say, aspect of essay writing that I might have written on 2 years ago, and it would be hard to find it, let's say, how to cite an authority or how to be argumentative or whatever, another aspect of essay writing. So I thought to myself, why don't I collect all the blog entries, add new material, reorganize it, structure it somehow, also ask other, world-renowned experts to contribute, and then publish it as a book so that everyone can access this knowledge and buy it and have it, once and for all in a structured manner instead of like flicking through the pages of the blog. So that's really how the book came about.
Yeah, that's such a fantastic idea. And you mentioned that you had some help from other people. So I wondered if you could tell us a bit more about who else contributed to the book.
Yes, sure. I think that's the thing I'm most proud of, to be honest, because some really fantastic, lovely professors, academics, and judges contributed. So, for example, Baron Newberger, the former president of the UK Supreme Court, has written an entry for my book, and I'm very grateful. Professor Mark Elliott, the chair of the Faculty of Law at Cambridge, Oxford Law Professor Nick Barber, Stephen Weatherall, the former chair of EU Law in Oxford, and my PhD supervisor in Oxford, Professor Catherine Barnard, Professor David Kershaw, who is the Dean of the LSE Law School, Professor van der Loon, who is the former Dean of Leiden Law School, and the list goes on and on. I don't want to forget someone, but many, many senior academics and judges have written entries for my book, and I'm very grateful because they did an excellent job. Their advice is spot on. On many occasions, it's fun to read as well. For instance, um, Alison Jones, the Cambridge law professor, Alison Young, sorry, compares writing an essay to choosing a movie. So it's always, fun to read, to see behind the scenes how these academics that have written so much that are so prolific, how they think about essay writing. So I think that's the most valuable aspect of the book.
Wow, that's a really impressive list of contributors. So, and fantastic. It sounds like an amazing resource. And your book is called How to Write Excellent Law Essays, an Unorthodox Guide. And I think the unorthodox part of the title really caught my interest. So I'm really curious to know more about why it's an unorthodox guide.
Well, yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? Yeah, that's actually intriguing, I'm sure. And the reason
Yes.
why I called it an unorthodox guide is, first of all, two things. One, that it's unorthodox to even have a guide to begin with, because no one writes such guides in these days, and it's all trial and error. And they say, you figure it out, and by the time you figure it out, you're in year three, and your marks have plummeted. So it's not very good if you figure it out on your own. But the reason why I think it's unorthodox is because my method of writing essays, which has worked for me and has worked for my students, asks the student to go behind the question and to be argumentative from the beginning. What do I mean? I tell students not to start answering questions and just, what is your view on UK parliamentary sovereignty, let's say, and how can it be squared with the rule of law? Let's take a first year essay. You don't need to accept the implicit premises of the question. The unorthodox element is you can challenge the assumptions of the question, go behind the question, dissect the question, and say, for instance, I'm not even going to agree that they need to be squared, these two concepts, or that they can be squared. It's about challenging the questions, which is, I think, a characteristic of only excellent and very, very confident law students, that they would go behind the question, so to speak, unpack its assumptions, and attack the premises that lead to the quote or the question given. And then this way they can build an argument from scratch that is both original, because all of their fellow students in their other essays just thought they had to answer the question given and not even challenge any bit of it. And so this leads to an excellent answer, but also I think it's more fun to write. So I think that's the unorthodox element.
That's really interesting, and I really wish that the book was out when I was a student. I would have found it so helpful.
Good to find.
And I wondered if you could maybe give us some insight into your top tips for writing a first class essay.
Yes, sure. I mean, there are so many, so I'll just list a few. First of all, essays are not mystery novels. We don't want to wait until the conclusion to find out what your argument is. Just tell us from the beginning, give us a sense of direction, and tell us what you will be arguing for. Secondly, don't be on the fence. It's risky to be on the fence. It seems safe, but it's not. Always pick a position, but don't be overconfident and pretend that your argument is the only argument. You have to be diplomatic about it, nuanced about it, yet firm and confident that this is the argument you chose. Then you need to paraphrase the quote or the question given so that the reader understands that in your own words, if you can explain what they asked you, you have understood it, right? And then you need to properly balance primary and secondary sources. What do I mean? Primary sources meaning, case law and statutes, secondary sources, books and articles. Your essay cannot only be 90% case law or 90% academic articles. It has to be rather balanced. And these are things that no one talks about or thinks about, but they do play a role at the end of the day. And the conclusion also has to come full circle. We see many essays because students are in a hurry to submit something that don't even have a conclusion, So without a conclusion, how can you write an excellent essay because you run out of time? Or the conclusion just starts mentioning new points. No, never mention new points in the conclusion. Just use the conclusion to reiterate things already said and just come full circle. So I think these are some top tips off the top of my head.
Fantastic tips. Like I've said before, I really wish I had this information when I was a student. So, what are some of the most common mistakes that students make when writing essays, and how can students avoid making these mistakes?
That's an excellent question, and I get asked this question a lot by students. And even if I answer the question, they still make the mistakes, to be honest. But I think we all
Well,
learn.
at least you've given them the information.
Yeah, exactly. First of all, they think that they are still in their high school era. They just want to talk about things, analyze how tricky, let's say, an issue is, and leave it at that. So if the question is, should tort liability be amended in order to be fit for the era of artificial intelligence? A student might say, oh, yes, I see the merits of this view and just analyze it. I see the merits of the other view and then leave it at it's complicated. So we see a lot of, especially in year one, first year law students, a lot of describing, a lot of explaining, but not a lot of arguing. And that's normal, but they have to get rid of that habit very quickly because a non-argumentative essay is not a law essay. They think it's safe, but as I said, it's not safe at all. Second thing that we see, and I'm afraid this has become an epidemic, as you might know, is plagiarism. And plagiarism is so insidious because even if you don't want to plagiarize and you're an honest student, you might make a mistake or you might not remember that what you found in your notes on your laptop, you just copied and pasted, 6 months ago from a source, but it didn't include the citation. And then there's no saving that essay because you will go through an academic misconduct panel and you will be penalized. So just a note to students, if you're not 100% sure that something is your idea, just attribute it to a source. Search for it, find a source which you can cite. And finally, I think the other mistake that students make is that they over rely on sources. Let's say a famous academic has written an article, and they just jump on the bandwagon of that academic. Let's say in constitutional law, it could be Nick Barber, it could be Paul Craig, without without either critically assessing it and finding some flaws. Okay, that's hard. If you can do it, however, it's excellent. Or at least telling us why they chose this view, why they agree. They just reiterate the views of Eliot, of Alison Young, of whatever, and we are left with the impression that we just read, an amalgamation, a collection of views by that professor, but we don't hear the student's voice. We need to hear the student's voice. Only if you hear their voice can the essay be excellent, I think.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Dimitrios. It's very, very helpful, I'm sure, for our listeners.
I'd like to take a moment to speak about the University of Law, which is the university I decided to study my LPC at. The University of Law is the sponsor of this podcast and makes it possible for us to continue bringing these episodes to you. So we really appreciate you supporting us by supporting our sponsors. What really sets the University of Law apart from other universities is its belief in training students for the real world from the moment they accept a place. The University of Law's experienced career service and award-winning pro bono clinics offer students the chance to get real-life legal experience which can boost employability. They offer a range of undergraduate and postgraduate legal training and master's degrees designed by qualified experts to help students excel at any stage of their career. Their courses are employment focused, honing key skills in a teaching environment based on real legal practice. Part-time and online study options are also available on many of their courses to help students work and study at the same time. If you'd like to find out more about the courses on offer, please click the link in the description box of the podcast.
And what do you think? I mean, you've given us a lot of information about how to write a good essay and the common mistakes. But I suppose, like you say, people have to sort of advance from school when they reach university, and potentially that could take time. So, what do you think is the best way for the students to improve their essay writing skills as quickly as possible, really?
Well, the first and obvious answer would be to buy my book, right?
A very subtle plug there.
Exactly. The actual answer would be that they have to actually participate in as many opportunities to write essays or to participate in mock exams or collections, as they're called in Oxford, or to form study groups where they can write. The only way to get better at writing is to write. You cannot get better at swimming by running, right? You have to actually practice what it is that matters in the exam. So the students should first of all take all opportunities to write essays. If these opportunities are not given to them, let's say because their law school is very big and the professors are overwhelmed and they only examine you once at the end of the year and they don't set formative assessments, then I'm sure they can ask their professors or their teaching assistants or whatever whether they can voluntarily write an essay, and if they wrote the essay, whether that TA or that professor would mark it. In my experience, 99% of the academics would say yes, because almost no one asks to write an essay voluntarily without having to write an essay, so they would be pleasantly surprised. So the student can just ask the professor, can I write an essay on this? And how can they find the question? They just open the past exam questions and they choose one and they answer that question and they send it to the professor, and the professor will gladly mark it, and then you will get feedback. And that feedback will be invaluable for two reasons. First, because you actually wrote it and you completed it and you get feedback on something real that you wrote, while my advice will necessarily be more generic, not directed to any student because it's a book. But secondly, they get the feedback from the person that will most likely be marking their work, their summative assessment in 6 months. So they need to know their quirks and what they want to see. For instance, how they want the citation to appear, or whether they agree that this argument is strong by that academic. So they get a feel earlier than other students about what is necessary. So I think this extra mile goes a long way. That would be my piece of advice.
I have never thought about that before. Such a good idea. Yeah, incredible. And obviously, I suppose you could do that whilst using your book as well to put into practice the new sort of guidance that you're taking on board and to practice writing essays in that way. So that's a fantastic idea. And for the listeners, of course, we're going to leave a link to the book in the description box of the podcast, so you can go and get that if you want to. And so I wondered if you have any general advice for university students that you'd like to share other than sort of essay writing advice.
Well, I think the one-stop shop should be to go to the student lawyer and find out everything they want to really get to know from your side. And this is not a plug or a compliment. I really mean it. I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that. And I suppose another way of practicing your writing skills is, we do take on writers with a student lawyer, so you can always, obviously it's not going to get marked, but certainly not by me, but you can at least practice your writing skills, writing articles for the student lawyer, and getting involved in the other things that we do. So thank you very much, Dimitrios. And where can listeners buy the guide?
Well, it's available both hard copy and on Kindle. You can just go to Kindle UK and search for Dimitrios Kyriazis, or just search for how to write excellent law essays, and they will see it. It already has been read by quite a few people that have kindly left their reviews on whether it was interesting or useful. So if they want to buy it, they can access it there. I think it's worth a read, simply because some ideas, perhaps not my ideas, but the ideas of President Newberger, or let's say Professor Kershaw, Professor Nick Barber, they might resonate with them. You never know. And some of the students that will buy it will have been taught by these people. So if they are an LSE law student, they will be taught by David Kershaw, Cambridge or Oxford, whatever, by another academic. So they will read advice that they will have heard before, but never in such a structured manner, tackling a specific question. And even if one page of the book resonates and helps them, it might boost their marks significantly. So I would be very happy if that happens. That's the purpose of this book. I wrote it out of love for the topic of essay writing, and so that this can stay and help more students.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. Even if I suppose the listeners just take one thing from your book, it could be the difference between getting a 2-2 and a 2-1, or a 2-1 and a 2-2. So, it could really just get you into that next grade bracket. So, I think, and obviously you're extremely passionate about the topic, and you explain it in a very easy to understand and very clear way, and you've got some fantastic contributors. So, I think it's just incredible that you've produced this invaluable resource. So thank you very much again for joining us on the show, Dimitrios. It's great to have you here with us, and you've given us so many tips throughout the past 20 minutes or so. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Camilla. It's been an honor and a pleasure to join you. It's always lovely to talk to you, and keep up the great work. I know you're helping thousands and dozens of thousands of students. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. And thank you to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.
To hear more of the Student Lawyers podcast, hit the subscribe button and leave us a star rating and review. If you would like to join the Student Lawyer as a writer, please email hello@thestudentLawyer.com.